For the members of the public, you can provide comment on the agenda item in person or online via Zoom during the public comment period. Zoom attendees will be muted until they're called upon by the chair or the clerk. To make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your hand icon or dial the *9 if you're calling in. And please state your name for the record. Once you start, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please note the commission is unable to respond directly to questions or enter into dialogue with commenters. Written comments may alternatively be submitted prior to the meeting via email to the clerk. First, I would like to start us off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Horvich, could you lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, we'd like to open it up to the public for any comments that are not listed on the agenda. If so, you could do that at this time.
Chair, if we can we got to do roll call first. A few other items.
Roll call, sorry. Good point. Sorry.
Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present except for Commissioner Sanders and Vice Chair Shanahan.
They're both ill, so that was...
Correct. They're both out due to illness.
Great, thank you. Can I get a roll call?
Chair Acey?
Here.
Commissioner Wege? Here. Commissioner Hoverts?
Here.
No, that's all I have on my list. What's the other name?
Ringler?
Thank you.
Perfect. So next, we would like to open it up to public comment for anything that's not listed on the agenda. Seeing that there's no public in person tonight, are there any public on Zoom that are wishing to comment? Please raise your hand.
Chair, there are no members of the public on Zoom at this time.
Perfect. We will move on to the next item, which is our consent calendar. Our consent calendar includes the minutes approval for the May 3rd draft minutes. Can I get a motion for the consent calendar? Or are there any comments for the any concerns from the consent calendar from the commission?
I couldn't open the document for some reason. It just,
The minutes?
the one that was, with the packet.
Linked to the packet?
Linked to the packet, it just says access denied and a whole bunch of super issues, so.
I had the same problem, but then I had to dig into the website to find the minutes.
Oh, I didn't go that far.
Yeah. The only correction I had on the minutes from last time was that you still had Chair Shanahan as the chair, but it was only minor, so nothing really other than that. Can I get a motion for the consent calendar if there's no other concerns with the minutes?
I'll make a motion to move.
Can I get a second? Perfect. Can I get a vote?
Commissioner Springler? Commissioner Hoverts?
Aye.
Commissioner Wege? Okay. And Chair Acey?
Aye.
And with Vice Chair is out sick and Commissioner Sanders is also out sick, the motion passes.
Great, thank you. The next item we have is our new business, which is the Water and Wastewater Reserve Capacity Calculator. And I believe there's a presentation, correct, Kevin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've been talking about this for a while, and I'm happy to be able to present this to the Commission tonight. It's just an informational item. I think it's going to be a real helpful tool for the Commission and staff to really understand the impacts of projects on our water and wastewater capacity. We do have our consultants, Susan Willis and Adam Fisher, who are the masterminds behind this spreadsheet. Are they out there? Okay, there they are. So, again, really the intention was that we've heard a lot of, talk from community members that, do we have enough capacity of sewer and water to be approving all these projects? And so this was a way to really get a handle on that and have a real-time tool that we can, put in, and there's a lot of different factors, and Susan will probably talk about that, about, you know, how many people are living in the houses and the number of units, the type of units, all those kinds of things that go into estimating the water and sewer use for an individual unit. One thing, of course, Susan probably will say this, but I'll just say it up front a little bit, is, you know, it doesn't really account for if there's no water, you know, in the ground as a result of a mega drought. So that's half of the equation, but the half of the equation that we can look at is our capacity to actually move the water around, filter the water, and supply it to the community and to new development. I'm just going to stop there because I know Susan's going to walk us through the calculator, and I don't know, it looks like Adam is here too. So Susan, you want to take it away? Ask, it says ask to unmute. She's talking.
We can hear a little background noise, and I heard you ask, can you hear us, Susan? But it was very quiet and hard to hear.
Is she on mute?
It's mute on her side. Well, now it's on our side, I guess.
Keep saying ask her to unmute.
Do you have her phone number so you can text her?
Hey, can you hear us now, Susan?
I'm talking about
I don't think she can see that. Really small.
I see the power in it.
Showing up as an option.
Try that. The speakers connect.
So this is the one that Alan's saying that we need to be attached to for it to be in the house system.
We can hear you now.
We've been having issues with this little microphone. No.
Awesome. Thank you. We can hear you. Hooray!
That extension may be too long, the voltage drop may be too much.
Well, it's not a USB. It's like that little guy.
No, that's the power.
That. Yes.
At least you're back to that.
Yeah, that's the one.
Inside of the computer. That one's the one I'm running. I want to do a brief recap of what happened because I didn't catch it. If you got that on audio. The Zoom recording's not going to be worth.
Okay, it's got to be the connection into the bottom of the microphone then. That's the problem.
Okay.
You know, you can test it too, and then you can find out which one is making the noise.
Right, but it's not. Yeah, oh, wait a minute. So Yeti just showed up there.
So when you do that,
There we go. There we go.
Sandra, can you hear us now? Sorry, Susan, can you hear us now?
Okay.
All right, Susan, we cannot hear you though.
Oh,
That's because you can hear us. That's one step in the right direction.
Give us a thumbs up if you can hear us.
Pretty sure she can.
She's laughing, so that's something.
I take it you can hear us, but you can't hear
yes.
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 So that's
Is she on mute?
Nope.
Nope.
Again, I would test the speakers.
It's not this CMS system headphones? Headphones. Yeah, that's what I was on, and she can't hear us. We can hear her.
Can you hear us now, Susan?
Yes. Yes.
She can hear.
I can just keep talking.
Volume down?
Tell you my life story. See if that helps.
Still unable to hear you. Sorry.
I can hear you though, Susan.
You can.
Oh, okay.
No, it
That's
looks like
cool.
Adam's testing his microphone. I mean,
I assume they can't hear me either.
I assume so.
Okay, I can hear her.
Can you hear us?
So it's the Zoom going into the room. That's what it is.
We check. See if it is.
That's good. This means it's just the audio connection to the Zoom.
I don't think this is exactly what we're doing.
Wait for this new system. Hopefully it works.
yes.
Hang on, Susan, sorry.
We think that's
No
half the
worries.
issue, because they've been installing cameras and messing with the audio system all week.
What's that, Alan?
She should try now.
Can you try now?
You say
Okay.
something?
I'm talking. Hello. Hi. What's up? Did that work?
Mike, make sure you're going with the headphones out.
Yep, microphones on Yeti, headphones on speaker.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey!
Hey, did that work?
yes.
Thank you. Sorry, we're getting a new system installed, and I think things have been,
Now, Peter was in here, they
the theater,
rearranged the board.
they rearranged the board. Thank you, Alan, appreciate it. I don't know if you heard my long-winded intro, but, I just kind of introduced this as a great tool that, we
Are excited about to be able to, express to the community where we are in terms of our ability to serve sewer and water and how projects are impacting that. I did indicate to the Planning Commission that, if there's no water in Lake Mendocino, and, that doesn't really account for that piece of it, but it does account for, our ability to serve it. So, Susan, I'm not going to go through all that again, but maybe you can just take it from here, and I know Adam's out there too, and if he wants to say something, that'd be great too.
Yeah, for sure. I think we were going to just sort of go over a couple slides about what we're doing, and then go over the tool. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, that's perfect. I don't know, do you want to share your screen?
Or,
Yeah, I can share my screen.
okay. All right, thank you.
Looks like I have the ability to do that, so. It'll happen someday. Great. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, we're currently seeing the blood signal that's, I don't know if that's the version you want.
Oh, are you seeing
We're seeing
this?
the full panel.
You're seeing this one?
But anyways,
Darn.
No, we can see it, it's fine, it's fine.
it's partially on you. You're fine.
Okay, I can just fix it. I can fix it.
It's probably this thing.
All right, okay. I'll just switch.
Oh, you're fine.
Here.
You're in a side-by-side view here.
What is a black power?
Yeah.
It is a black PowerPoint. Is this better?
Yep.
Great. You mean you don't want to see all my notes? Come on, guys. Sorry. Anyway, so today we just wanted to go over what went into the calculator, and then sort of what it does, and then we'll go over just a quick run through of how it can be used. So the request was to have us to take the information that we already have produced on behalf of Cloverdale through the unit rate study, the unit flow study that we did in 2020 and some other work to really help develop a tool that'll allow developers or just the community look at where the city is in terms of overall capacity. So here we're talking about, does the city have sufficient capacity in the treatment plant to take additional wastewater? We're not talking about, are the pipes sized correctly or anything like that. We're talking just primarily in terms of assuming everything can be upgraded appropriately or whatever needs to get done. Once it gets to the treatment plant, are we okay? And so that's both for the drinking water demand, but then also for the wastewater. So when we're talking about this, we're really looking at 3 different metrics here. So the first is drinking water treatment capacity. And so that's really just based on the treatment plant. Doesn't account necessarily for any water restrictions you may have. And so the second one that we're talking about is available water, which is something that the city can set based on whatever restrictions are in place. And then the third one is wastewater treatment capacity. And so what we first sort of did to try to figure this out was, well, we need to understand what the current city usage is, and then try to extrapolate that into what would happen in a future development. And we know that existing uses are probably going to be slightly different than future uses, just in terms of requirements for irrigation and things like that. So new developments need to be like low impact in terms of water usage and stuff like that. So what we first started with was collecting data from the city. That was stuff that we already had, for the most part, information about the wastewater treatment capacity and the drinking water treatment capacity, and then wanted to include that ability to make adjustments if restrictions are implemented. And then from previous studies that we had done, we looked at both annual and seasonal, which is winter water use per dwelling unit in the residential areas. We primarily focused on the residential information that was from billing data because the residential uses are probably going to be easier to estimate. Whereas if you put in a commercial building, that's really going to vary depending on what you put in that commercial building or institutional building, or et cetera. So we can't estimate that in advance. So we didn't try to come up with what that number would be in a specific situation. So we focused on the residential. And so we used both that data that had been collected and reviewed by GHD previously, and then also used some of the information that Cloverdale had put together in the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, just to sort of check ourselves, make sure that we're doing something that makes sense. So we also wanted to see, if we've got this information from Cloverdale from usage, is it reasonable, or are there other numbers that are used as guidance by other cities of similar locations or climates or water sources or things like that? So we did a search through available data from other cities. We looked at like everywhere along the coast. From what we could find online, different cities have different things available. So we got a lot of information from Ukiah and Santa Rosa in particular. And then we were able to sort of find a couple in different places around the state, just to give ourselves the confidence that we know, we're starting with a good number that is reasonable. And that was collected through UWMPs, water master plans, water rate studies, and also we compared it against sort of the industry best practice and guidance manuals. The interesting thing, though, is in terms of guidance manuals, a lot of the numbers are left over from the 90s before we were in the sort of drought that we are in right now. So we wanted to make sure that we were improving upon that. So that was sort of our basis data for comparison. And at the end of the day, we figured out that, the Cloverdale specific results are, within the expected range among peers, but really the data that we have and collected and already have looked at is really the best ground truthing available. And so we're going to use those numbers to actually base the calculations off of, which is actually really, it's a good, robust data set. So we're glad that we were able to do that. So just to sort of walk through what we developed for this calculator, the idea was we wanted to come up with a calculator that could be useful in lots of situations. And because when you put in a development, it sort of varies what kind of house you're going to have or whatever, different residential developments, what kind of buildings you're going to have. We wanted to come up with some standard unit. And so it made sense to go down the path of per capita usage, because that's what we were trying to decide between dwelling unit and per capita usage. But we had more data on the per capita usage than we did on the per dwelling unit. And so we just used a conversion factor to get there. So we estimated, we're trying to estimate a per person usage based on that 2020 unit flow data analysis data. So we used both the annual and the winter customer data. So the idea with the winter customer data is that is a pretty good indicator of what people use in their homes, because during the winter, there's not a lot of irrigation going on. So we could use the billing data from just the winter months to indicate indoor usage. And so we could separate then in the rest of the months of the year, we could separate the indoor usage from the irrigation usage, which then comes into the calculation later on. So we were able to get multifamily and single family irrigation estimates. And then we compared and weighed that data for the single and multifamily residences based on the number of units of each one currently among the housing available in Cloverdale. So it's very sort of location specific. And the result that we got there was actually that not accounting for irrigation, we're actually looking at approximately 81 gallons per day per capita sort of indoor residential use. So that's sort of our starting point. And so then we additionally identified peaking factors, because what we really are interested in is that worst case scenario. What's a situation under which the city will not be able to meet the demand either for wastewater or for drinking water? And, oftentimes it's important. It depends on the time of year, and there are a lot of other things that come into it. But we found that the peak month demand occurred during August of 2020, during which approximately 1.62 million gallons per day were used by the existing residents in Cloverdale. So we take that worst case scenario to come up with that reserve capacity. So the idea is you've got all the full capacity of the treatment systems, and then you want to take out what that worst case scenario of whatever is already existing is. And then that gives you what's considered a reserve capacity. So how much do we have to work with in terms of future people, additional developments, and things like that. So we took that peak calculation away from the total plant capacities. In this situation, we calculated the peak demand according to the water billing data. And then the wastewater in this situation is assumed to be approximately equal to the water demand, which is a pretty typical assumption. The vast majority of water that is used in the home then becomes wastewater as well, with the small exception of water you might take with you somewhere else. Everything goes back in the toilet or shower or whatever. So the main difference is irrigation. So the reserve capacity for both the water and the wastewater treatment, where the total plant capacity minus that peak demand, or in case of wastewater, the peak production. And then we wanted to see how can we make this into a useful tool. Let's calculate that reserve capacity in terms of potential remaining customers. So we have an estimate of per capita usage. Let's figure out, just to get a ballpark, how many more people can the city serve with what's remaining in the reserve capacity. And so then we'll show you the calculator in just a minute, but typically the way that it's used is it's intended for a user who is a developer who, you don't really want to be messing with the back end of what are the numbers that we're assuming and things like that. So the user develops an estimate for the residential population of the development, non-residential uses, so that would be your restaurants, your retail, your commercial, industrial, institutional users, wineries, things like that, which again are really based on what the usage is, and there is guidance out there as to what to use for those estimates, but they don't come into play into this sort of high-level calculator. And then irrigation demand for the development. So the assumption there is that that will be part of the planning process anyway. So they'll need to estimate how much irrigation and have the landscape approved for being low water use. And so those are the three inputs. And then once the calculator takes those inputs, it calculates for this new proposed development the total peak residential water use using the per capita and then the peaking factor that we developed from August, the peak irrigation demand also from that August number, and then it passes through the daily non-residential uses because it's assumed that that's, if you're cooking, you're cooking year round. So, the water usage is approximately the same. Then once those have been calculated, then it subtracts that proposed development total daily demand from the remaining reserve capacity, and then determines whether both the water and the wastewater systems have adequate capacity to meet the development. And then it displays that in colors, and we'll show you that in a sec. The results that are displayed on the main page currently are whether or not there's adequate water treatment and wastewater treatment capacity in the existing system. And so again, that water is the overall water available is based off of anything that could include restrictions due to pumping requirements or something like that. Then water and wastewater treatment. Then it also displays the remaining reserve water, available water treatment capacity and wastewater treatment capacity as a percentage of their total capacity. So it's an idea of, okay, if you include this this development, how much does the city then have left to work with? And then also it calculates, provides an estimate of how much of the total overall system capacities that one proposed development would use. And so that could be useful if you're trying to set limits on how large a development could be or something like that. It also could be useful if you're trying to set rates or requirements for upgrades for a new proposed development. And then just a couple additional features that we've worked into here. So we really want to, again, account for drought restrictions on well pumping. So that's something that can easily be changed. Also accounting for developments which have already been approved. And so there's a second page where you can put in anything that's been approved and keep that updated so that the calculator is updated. And that really just mostly removes that from the reserve capacity. And then you can also account for more drought tolerant landscaping in new developments by setting the ratio of the new development irrigation to old or existing development irrigation. And so that's set as a default of 0.5. So we're assuming that new construction will have irrigation demands that are approximately half of what the existing development in the city has or requires. And so that can be adjusted if you see changes or there, other guidelines. So then in terms of trying to figure out how to share this, there are a couple different ways that the city can deal with this. You could either keep an updated master version of that spreadsheet and then share it with potential developers or the public on an on-demand basis that allows you to keep everything updated, keep control of what everyone sees, and then minimize the number of people that have access to it if for some reason you want to keep some of that information safe. You could post that updated spreadsheet on the city website for general use if that's something you desire, and we can help you develop something that would make more sense in a public facing, because again, there's a lot of information that this accounts for. Or there's also the opportunity to integrate the calculations into the city website itself. So it's just like a tool where you can just put the numbers in and then the calculations happen on the back end. A lot of the work that was done and what's displayed here went into the development of sort of background-based numbers, and then the actual calculations that the calculator is doing are not extremely complicated. So I don't, if you guys have somebody who writes HTML scripts for you, or would just go take input data, put it into this Excel spreadsheet and pop the answers back out, that also is another option. And then whenever you're thinking about what you could do for making it public facing, the city should determine whether the total reserve capacities or approved developments should be shared with the general public online or through email, and we can help you simplify the results. So for example, we could do something like move all but the yes or no answers about the capacity being met to other sheets, hide all but the front page before sharing it and lock those sheets. Or the calculations could be converted to macros, which then run in the background of the Excel spreadsheet. So now I'm going to actually hand it over to Adam to walk us through it. I think it probably makes sense to go through and see what it looks like before we get too far outside. So Adam, do you want to share your screen?
Yes, thanks, Susan. Yeah, let me share my screen. Let's see. That is not what I want to. Are you seeing my screen or just some?
We're seeing the agenda.
Okay. So are you seeing me switch to a spreadsheet now?
Yes.
Perfect. Great. That's what I wanted. All right. So Susan walked through all the kind of technical stuff, and I get to show you the kind of simplified input, and hopefully it helps pull together your understanding of what we have here. So I'm going to go through a few different tabs here and enter some data. So this is what we pictured as the public-facing, potentially public-facing interface. But basically, this is the tab where you can enter data, and the yellow highlighted fields are places where a development information gets entered. And then it triggers an update of all of these numbers down below based upon formulas and stuff that isn't located in the other tab. So let's just run through an example here. Let's say a development comes in that's going to put in 1,000 people. It's going to be mixed use, so it's going to have another 1,500, 15,000. Let's make it a big number so it shows up gallons per day of some sort of commercial use. And then the irrigation estimate, the MAWA, I forget, excuse me, but I forget what that stands for offhand, but it's part of your regulations on what a developer has to come up with for the irrigation estimate for a year. So let's put in 150,000 there. And then you can see, maybe you didn't see, but these are all yes still because there's adequate capacity for this development. These numbers went up slightly, and you can see that the project numbers, these went from 0 to reflecting a number. So this number would have been before 60% because it went down by 2% or went up by 2%, and same here, 2% and 7%. So the wastewater system has less capacity for new development than the water system does. We can even put in a really big number here to really trigger. See, for you can't take 100,000 people is what this is saying, which is not unexpected. But so this is the tab that most people are going to use, and the basic development data gets entered here, and it gives an answer on the results. Feel free to chime in with any questions as I walk through this, or Susan, if you have something in particular you want to point out. So this is the basic interface. This next page, this next tab is the approved developments that you've approved that have been entered into the new development input tab and have said, yes, there's adequate capacity for it. This allows you to cumulatively add in additional developments as they happen. So we'll put in an example here, another 1,500 people already came in, and there was some non-residential use and of course some irrigation use. And then that number, I mean, it's hard to see the changes when we come back here, but that number changed the remaining capacity numbers here because it was taken into account as we subtracted them. You see there 60, 57, and 30. If we clear these back out, you can see they go up 62, 60, and 43. So as you get new developments, you would continue to enter them here, and then everything would get updated here. And then this is the data and calculations tab. This wouldn't necessarily be public facing, not that anything is being hidden here, but it's a little more complicated and a lot of formulas, and it's not something you necessarily want to explain to everybody. One interesting thing that it does here, and Susan kind of touched on this with some of what she talked about, is it actually provides an estimate, reserve capacity in a population-based form. And we didn't want to report this on the new development input tab because this is much more of a guess than the numbers that are input here. And that is because of the assumed irrigation factor. We don't know how much irrigation new development is going to happen, but we can look at what type of irrigation happens in the city now and make an assumption. Again, we made an informed decision that we're going to guess that the new development is going to use a lot less irrigation than existing, and 50% was put in there. But that number directly ties to this reserve capacity and the population calculation. So we were kind of thinking, not necessarily, but kind of a for your eyes to kind of help understand the system and the reserve in it. I think that really covers the main features of it. The other tabs here, again, tie into other data that was used in it. This is the unit flow analysis that we did as part of the South Cloverdale work. These are references that point to other people's data that corresponds to the data that we used for you, and some urban water management planning data from other similar communities, again, that we use to kind of check your data to say, are these good numbers and do they make sense, and are we using good data here? At this time, I think we're ready to take any questions that anybody has, and maybe Susan has some closing comments.
Yeah, so what our plan is for this is take any feedback that you all have as to what you'd like to see for us in terms of finishing this up and putting it together. We also provided a report about sort of how everything's calculated and how it's used in the calculator, so that you have it for reference if you ever want to develop it further, or particularly if you want somebody to go in and turn it into a tool online or something like that. Yeah, so, and also, can you go back to the data and calculations tab? So along with the calculations themselves, you can see, can you hover over the formulas up there? So the formulas are provided just as reference. So ID number 5 times ID number 2 divided by ID number 1. This is how the calculations are done. And then there's a description about, how it was calculated and what that calculation means. So that's for reference also in the future, in case anybody wants to really dig into how it was calculated and what you want to use it for, if it ends up being something that somebody wants to see on the regulator side or something like that. So, yeah, so that's most of what we have. Are there any questions, or do you have any suggestions or ideas for what you'd like to have sort of public facing, or if you want us to have part of these hidden or anything like that, please let us know.
Yeah, if I could chime in, Chair, you may have a question of how do we know how many people will be in a development? So in our housing element, we do have an estimate of the 2.65 people per household. So we would probably use that number, generally speaking. I mean, if we had some reason to think there might be more, maybe based on bedroom count or something like that, that nice thing about this is we can adjust it. But, the housing element does use data to come up with that figure of people per household, and that's being updated, so that may change as we go forward. The other thing is, from staff's perspective, when we do our CEQA documents, I mean, one of the questions is, do you have adequate water and wastewater capacity? And using this will help us streamline the CEQA documents. I mean, having this is really kind of a service to developers. I mean, we could, like Susan said, for industrial projects that may use a ton of water, we'll ask them for an engineer's study, and we'll peer review that to understand their water use if it's not some standardized use that like they have here. So in terms of public facing, I mean, it may be useful. I mean, it's always something that we're going to be able to use internally to try to come to some understanding of what the water use is and how that affects our capacity. And really the reason that we had this study and this project done was to try to help the commission when they're having the questions, approving projects about the water use and how a particular project will affect our water use. So we're hoping that this would be a helpful tool to give you some assurity that we did look at that, and you can see how much work went into this and how much data is behind all of this. And as we work with it more, we'll feel confident that it's giving us the accurate numbers. So.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to bring it to the commission to see if you guys have any questions about the tool itself, or any recommendations to the group on improvements to the tool. Yeah.
I do have a question. If we could go back to that spreadsheet.
I'm sorry.
Can we go back to the spreadsheet?
Yeah, can you bring the spreadsheet back up?
Can you go to the approved development? That one, that tab. Yeah, there you go. So on that one, I really like that one. I like it because at a glance, I could see that you included this development, especially if I'm doing, well, did you include that one? I don't want to keep asking the same question, so I like seeing it there. And then is that, if it's shared with the public, I don't mind. I like that it's shared with the public because then I will have access to it as well, and I can see it at a glance. Is that going to be a lock screen so that no one can make adjustments to it?
That's up to you.
Or lost sales, I would say. So that they cannot be
Adjusted. The only person that can adjust that would be city.
I think
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Susan. I don't know
Yeah.
if this particular
would
one.
be public facing. I think it was more the first one that Adam went
Development
over,
input tab.
just that one,
Just that one?
so they can get a quick glance.
That interior data feeds that, and so we could make it presentable to the public. But yeah, I think that the control of the data inside that cell would be done by city staff, correct,
Right.
Kevin?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, if we could have the public see that and have it locked, that would be great.
Well, they can PDF these and send them off as a PDF so that they can never make those edits.
Oh, is that, but you want to have it a working thing, right? So that you can enter I think it's going to be a spreadsheet so that you could enter the information, correct?
Yes, it would. I mean,
So the,
Chair Acey's right. We could make it, I could see this being one of the appendixes to our CEQA documents that, we would PDF and include more information. So I think, but the intent was really to have this particular one public facing, and we don't have to have it public facing. I mean, it might be a good idea. That's why we're kind of asking if you think that would be.
I can see where Commissioner Horvitz says that both tabs would be, I think, beneficial to the community to show whenever we're showing it. I don't have a concern with the fact that the data is controlled by the staff, and so when we do make it public, we can PDF it. We can leave it in the Excel form and show this kind of as an active tool if we needed to use it as well, which is kind of beneficial. My one concern is the remaining capacity kind of, and maybe I just don't, in layman's term, I don't understand it. The remaining capacity, when you're adding more units to the calculation, that is going up. And so it's showing that there's 62% capacity remaining, or that's 62% used. So there's really only 38% capacity. Because I feel like it's a little confusing, misleading to me, the remaining capacity part, the red tab there.
As we add in flows, that number goes down, not up.
I think, Adam, whenever you first said it, I think you said up instead of down.
Okay. Yeah, I may have misspoke for sure.
We should clarify that.
Because that's a good point.
I do love this recommendation by staff to add some kind of calculation to this that can equate, whether it's based upon the housing element, I don't know. But something I think the average public individual is not going to try to figure out the per capita, and they're going to want to know, you're adding 300 units.
right. How are you figuring out the
that?
spaces?
And so I would love to see how we can legitimize and put that number into this screen somehow, and maybe you can have like a one cell off that says
A legend.
this equals to this many units per the housing element type of thing, and we can change that as the housing
Do an
element
asterisk and
updated.
then down below say, yeah.
One of the main reasons we didn't do that was because this allows a more accurate estimate of the water use, because on a big scale, estimating by dwelling units is great, and that is how we do the planning work most of the time. But at a smaller, kind of development, a 1-bedroom apartment versus a 3-bedroom apartment, they are not going to generate the same amount of water. So this allowed for, to be a little bit more specific to how big the dwelling units were and how many people would actually be living there is why we did it like this. But it would be very easy to add dwelling unit estimate to the information. But that's why we chose this way, or at least part of the reason.
Notice what you're saying.
I think maybe a little bit of both. I love that you have this data set that can be locked and can be more pure. But I do think that there needs to be some kind of correlation to that, and whether or not we add 1, 2, 3 bedrooms, whether or not you add in the calculation multifamily versus single-family homes, because they are different in their calculation. I get that, but I just see that the average individual, separate from this calculation, we can say roughly this number of people equals roughly this number of homes, and we can kind of tie it off. But based up purely on the calculations of people, this is how it changes the data set.
Yeah, I could see people arguing over how many people would actually be
In a home.
in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
development or, in each unit. And that's why the housing element does default to 2.6, thinking some houses are bigger and smaller. But as I said, if just say we can adjust it. If we get an apartment complex that's all 4-bedroom, we can kind of do worst case with this, or we can stick with the standard 2.6 that's based on.
I would stick with the standard, already proven method from another type of methodology of housing, and then that's going to change over time. And so if you had a footnote down there saying that 1,000 people equates to, 400 people, 400 homes because it's 2 point something, then, and that's is based on the housing element dated on this date, and then we just have to change that date and change the number.
Yeah,
to
I like
correlate with
that. I
this.
think it's a
that's
good idea.
helpful to go forward. But that's my recommendation. The other item I didn't know about was, I didn't see, maybe you have this in your calculation, but storage. I know we talked about wastewater and we talked about that, but is the storage capacity of the tanks, is that included in this calculation?
It is not.
No, it's not. It's just based off of treatment and, based off of treatment capacities for water and wastewater.
So I think that's, I know you tipped this off, Kevin. I think for us as a commission to know what that means, and this calculation is purely based on the housing development in the community, not on the flow of the river, not on what's up the river with the Potter Valley project, not on droughts, not on the storage of water. It's strictly what is the wastewater treatment plant to the capacity of meeting the needs of our city. Correct? Okay. Because
I was going to touch on
If
that,
we're considering
that it be public, that how do we get people to understand that so that they don't misconstrue that we have X amount of water availability, but yet you're telling us in this drought that we need to cut back water, but look, we have plenty of water. So that's the only thing that I was thinking of with it, being public, that we really clarify what they're seeing there and that they're not seeing like overall water availability. Hey, we've got plenty. Why do we need to conserve?
Yeah, and I imagine the one commissioner that's not here is Sanders to explain this better, but I would assume it's more of a, this is our current city's system can take this much capacity, but that has nothing to do with the amount of water flow that comes to our city, and that can come from the reserves, it can come from the river, it can come from above, and all of that. But so.
If I can for a second, that's exactly why we have this other field here, adequate water available. And we described it as, a function of, pumping capacity or some other system limitation. So if there's a drought, if you know your water is limited for whatever reason to, 3.5 MGD, that reflects back here, and we see the overall water availability went down even more. So that I think that what you're talking about is built in. This was done at the request of the city. I think Kevin asked for this information, but so that's why this is here.
So then my other recommendation, Kevin, would be on that front page to figure out how we came up with that number and spell that out in a form that says we're taking in this much drought, we're taking in this much, that created that number calculation that is what's kind of counterbalancing that. And I think that would spell it out for many people.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I was kind of going with that, is that we need some sort of disclaimer that really spells out what they're looking at and deciphering.
No, I think that's good because.
And then I would even put a doomsday scenario so that if we ever had to show this as a tool, we can go, let's just say that Potter Valley disappeared. Here's where that number goes, and this is how that changes.
And we do have an urban water master plan which has stages of droughts. So when we get these drought declarations, the council decides which stage to select based on our usage and what the state is telling us. And right now we're in a stage 4. So that does affect development. So when they are going to hook up, they need to do certain things. So that does get adjusted, which is in parallel to this, which could be adjusted on that tab that Adam just showed us.
Couldn't that be explicitly shown, stage 2, 3, 4, or something like that? How those capacities would be, how those reserves would be affected?
That's what this tab does.
Well, yeah, but it's kind of buried in the, I'm thinking about the one
That's not
that
gonna
you're
be
talking
seen.
about for a public-facing
Highlighting
document.
it back to the
that
front
you-
page.
You have a little box over there that says this is based on stage whatever drought
And that's easy
calculation.
to do. Loop it.
Yeah, I
Because when people come, you know, and talk about a development, they talk drought, but there's no quantified, you know, there's no quantification to that. It's just, oh. And so I think to quantify it,
data's intimidating, so I try to find out a way to quantify it in a basic sense. It doesn't have to be exact, but I think if it's in the same ballpark, it shows where we're trying to really think about this.
well, but if it affects the allowable pumping capacity, right there's the number, then you just, you have a little table that shows in, if it's that simple, if it's level 4, the allowable pumping capacity is whatever it is,
Drops to
2.3 or so, I don't know. But, and then somebody can kind of see it right there, that's the number that.
I think it's also just a function of what is actually limiting it. I mean, it may be a good idea if there's worry that the remaining capacity will indicate something that's not actually true, or it might be confusing. It may actually just be better to remove that from the public facing view, because it's not really necessary for everybody who's a developer to look at that and say, oh, good, and here we still have 65% left or something like that. It's not like necessary for the analysis. This could definitely remain. The remaining capacity could be on the back end for the city to look at. Because I'm just thinking, in situations where there isn't a specific pumping capacity limit, or that limit is a lot higher than what you're asking for people to cut back with, even if everything's going perfectly, it's a limit. It's a highest number you can possibly create, right? Like it's the most water you can create and treat. So having that as like the aspirational number that we can meet, again, is not really something that your water department's going to want to try to explain away on every occasion. I'm just thinking that the number of things that would need to go into an explanation on this page about what the actual limit is might be really, really complicated to try to do an update. It's possible, but it might just be difficult. It might be easier just to remove this remaining capacity information from the public-facing page.
Yeah, I don't like removing it. I think it's helpful rather than just having the yes/no tabs. I think keeping some kind of percentage at least spells out or describes a little bit what the data is adding up to come to yes/no. So I agree that it can cause some concerns, but our problem in this city is making sure that we're more transparent to them, and so I think we should show it more. I just think we should also spell out how that one calculation of taking on an unforeseen item can be there. And I do love this tool. I would love to make sure that every developer uses this tool or sees it within their SQL or whatnot, because what it's going to do is highlight that we are serious about our capacity, we're serious about our water, and that they need to be very cautious with what they put in their irrigation and their building. And so it's going to tip off everyone that they got to be serious. What it doesn't say, what we have to remember also, is that developments get approved, they get developed at different paces. And so, this development was approved then, and they saw this calculation. They could have now been number 5, 6 down the line when things have changed. So it's not always to date of the development.
Well, and if that calculation is being based on what is the absolute maximum capacity, is that what it should be based on, or should it be based on what our water department says we really shouldn't go over this amount, right? Because it's like my truck can tow 13,000 pounds, but should it? Not so much, right? So kind of the same concept. Yes, it can do this, but should it? Maybe it needs to reflect what the city is comfortable with without
Stressing the system.
stress. Yeah, thank you.
Right. And I think that there's got to be a range.
Yeah.
64 is such a lovely, precise number, but it's probably somewhere from 58 to 72 or something like that. Who knows?
Or maybe that's probably a more true and less misleading is to say that it's between this range to this range, and it changes from a data range. But someone had a question about storage capacity, and I wonder if that is something that needs to be thought about. I don't know, the tanks on the hills. That's a whole other tool that we need to create, is what would happen with the river flow. If the river flow goes down per what the Potter Valley project wants to do, if it's cut to 40% of the river flow of what it currently is, that affects the aquifers, which affects our treatment plant, which affects a lot of the water we get and well water. So there's a whole cause and effect of just removing the river water. And then Lake Mendocino or Lake Sonoma, removing the capacity of those lakes are a huge cause and effect. So I think that's a whole other study, and I think the man-made solution for us in our city is to increase storage, and have more and more storage, but at what cost?
What are the new? Don't we have new water projects going in? Isn't that increasing some of our storage?
Yeah, but I'm saying we're not near the capacity if we lost Russian River.
Oh gosh, I know. Yeah.
The storage that could survive us without that river. So I mean.
Are you talking about potable water storage as part of the distribution system?
Yes.
Yeah, that wouldn't be part of this calculation, because this was just based on what the water treatment plant can produce and what the wastewater treatment plant can treat. And to be clear, this didn't cover the pipes in either the water or the sewer system on whether they can handle the additional flows. That's a separate analysis than this. And storage would be part of that calculation on sizing the water system pipes.
Who's responsible, this is maybe a question for Kevin, if Baumgartner Ranch needs X amount of gallons, do they need to lay pipe all the way to the treatment plant to get it to them, or?
As part of the development review process, we have our engineers, typically Coastland, who does our development engineering review, and they're keenly aware of areas of town that need improvements, and a lot of times projects like that have to do off-site improvements to serve their project. So it's fully vetted through Public Works and engineering.
But what we don't have is a recycled water program yet, and so by requesting these projects to put in that purple pipe saves us money down the road to connect all the purple pipe together should we do that recycled water. And I imagine that the recycled water is not in this calculation either, which could also increase the capacity.
It's not included.
Yes. I have a question.
Who's using this spreadsheet? Are other cities using this exact spreadsheet? I know that these calculations are based on Cloverdale's numbers, but the concept of this spreadsheet, is it being used by other cities?
So we developed this specifically for the city of Cloverdale. So whether or not other cities are using a similar calculation, we don't actually know. But I mean, it's nuanced for each city, so they wouldn't be using the same exact calculation either way. But yeah, so other people are doing a similar calculation, whatever they're considering things like new developments, but it's not in this format because we developed this specifically for you guys. Other people do have guidelines and estimates that they make whenever they're approving a new development often as like a will serve letter type thing where the developer is required to calculate how much water or sewer they're going to demand that their project's going to require. And then that oftentimes will also come along with, okay, you're reviewing, you can put that in, but you need to make these improvements to the distribution system to get it, to be able to actually receive that type of, that level of service. So it's just not quite the same.
And to be clear, Cloverdale will still want to do that because, again,
Their distribution and collection systems are not being analyzed with this spreadsheet. This is just, can you produce enough flow or treat enough flow?
Any other questions
from the commission? Any comment or questions from the public?
Thank you, Chair. I see no members of the public are present at this time.
Perfect. Hearing none, we will end that item. I think you have your direction, correct, Kevin?
We do. It sounds like on the public facing, we need to put some footnotes and really explain what's going on here and clarify and, you know, maybe some disclosures and things like that. So I'll work with Susan.
I appreciate your work, Susan, and thank you for what you guys have provided. I think it's very valuable to the developers too, not just what we can show to the public.
Thank you for the feedback and thank you for your ideas. So we'll follow up with Kevin to finish that off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Going on to the next item, we have the planner's report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wish Mike Shanahan was here because he served on the Planning Commission for a lot of years, and this is actually his last meeting. So I just want to give him a big shout out for all his service and his great work on the Planning Commission. So thank you, Mike, if you're out there listening. So we will be nominating a new vice chair. We do have a couple vacancies, and we have some applications. I've been working with the mayor now to interview those folks and bring them on board. That would go to the city council in the next month or so. So we'll have a couple new faces up there, hopefully. Another thing I want to let you guys know is in the proposed budget that will be adopted and go into effect next month, we did increase the amount of planning commissioner training budget. So if I know Commissioner Holverts went to the League of Cities and really enjoyed it. So those opportunities will be open to other commissioners. So we'll send you things as they come along that seem maybe applicable. And then we don't have any real development projects queuing up at this point. I was going to ask the commission or maybe recommend that we cancel the July 5th meeting, day after the holiday, and we don't really have anything.
We should get together. Yeah, I'm comfortable with canceling that meeting. I would make a recommendation for whatever the upcoming meeting is to give a special invite to Vice Chair Shanahan to come back as a co-panelist, and at least we can give some warm thank yous thanks to his decades of dedicated service. So,
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely. Let's see, what else do I have? I think that's it. Thank you for all your input on this tonight. I think makes it a better. It's good to have you guys look at it and just because I've been looking at it for a while and just to get your opinions and some things I didn't even think of that I think will make it a lot more helpful to the public. So
Perfect.
Appreciate that.
Glad to be of help. Any other items from the commission or direction to the staff?
An observation, it looks like Baumgartner Ranch is going to start grading or something up there. There's a gate and some.
Yes, they have a grading permit, and the building permit is quick on the heels. Right now, it's the multifamily portion. We haven't seen any building permit requests for the townhouses or the single family, and we continue to work with the developer on the design of the park.
Any other direction to the staff? Perfect. With that, I think we can adjourn tonight's meeting and move to the next meeting, which is to be determined.
Yes, thank you.
you.